Hi, my name is Alicia Wackerle-Hollman, and Scott asked me to respond to some questions for your panel in class. I am at a conference on Thursday, so I'm going to record these responses, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you as you go through the class. So the first question that Scott asked about was just to describe my general experience with grant writing and grant getting. What have I sought? What kinds of grants? And where have I seen successes and challenges? And then what are my plans for grant writing the next 2 to 3 years? That's a big question. Grant writing and grant getting are two different animals, I think. Writing is a very refined set of skills that takes a lot of time and investment in honing your voice for your particular audience. And grant getting is the, successful end goal of that behavior, and probably across most of the grant entities that fund, the hit rates are rather low, so grant getting happens a lot less often than grant writing. So the grants that I've typically sought are in line with the research agenda that I have crafted as part of my work to support early language and literacy assessment, or around parenting intervention and engagement. So those are sort of the two content buckets that I seek grants for. And successes and challenges of those grants are grant writing is unforgiving, and so I've had more than my share of rejected applications, and what that means typically to me is revise and resubmit unless there's some seriously critical flaw in the reasoning of the grant. That most of the time the grant agencies that are public entities like NIH and NSF and IES, they provide feedback on your submissions, and so using that feedback to revise and craft a proposal is critical if you expect to receive funding, or at least that's been my path. The path with foundations is a little bit different. In my experience with foundations, they're not always interested in giving feedback, and so it can feel a little bit like blind grant writing, and sometimes as a result is even less forgiving because you expend a lot of energy crafting proposals and then don't necessarily know if you were close or very far from the mark when you don't receive funding. So that can be a little bit of a different animal regarding how you approach grant writing if you're seeking a public forum of grant proposal RFAs, or if you're seeking private foundations. Challenges are the waiting game, right? Submitting a proposal and then waiting to hear about feedback or lack of funding, or funding when you're excited and lucky to receive it as a result of good ideas. I think other challenges are positioning yourself in a climate to be ahead of the curve on what the funding priorities are for an agency. So doing homework to try to figure out what they're interested in funding, and maybe what they're not, what's kind of going out of the tides is important. So, and then challenges more broadly in grant writing are just becoming better and better at voice and conciseness as you're presenting an idea to a panel of reviewers. I think when I first started grant writing, I still tend to write I'm long-winded, but I've learned over time to be more concise in my arguments and to truly try to trim the fat, trim the adjectives and additive content that really doesn't add to substance. And that's helped me a lot, I think, along the way. So where am I heading in the next, I think it says 2 to 3 years? I'll continue to seek grants. So my position here at the U is 100% grant funded. So if I continue to want to be employed, I have to seek grants. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I feel as though I can go for grants that align with my research agenda. So I lead my own research, but certainly early in my career, I was more open to seeking kind of anything that would fill my efforts so that I could stay gainfully employed at 100%. So I think that there is an ebb and flow to that depending on how using grants in your career to leverage your time. If it's 100% of your time, then I think we might have to early in our careers be a little more flexible. If it's only a smaller proportion of your time because of a hard funded line, then I think you have a lot more flexibility to decide when and where how to apply to different kinds of grants.